going to switch on the recording now. Could somebody test the chat box for me? We've had one or two issues with that, so someone could just pop a hello in the chat box. That'd be really helpful, and then we know it's working okay. All right, thank you so much, guys. That's really appreciated. This session will run for about an hour or so, but I won't talk for a whole hour. I'm going to leave time for questions. Do use the chat box and get your questions in there. We know that you've got lots of questions around sort of how to find a job, how to conduct a graduate job search, because we see you every day of the week in appointments and in meetings and at workshops. So this is a big topic. We're not going to be able to cover everything, but we've got some great resources from the team on our website where you can get a lot of the links and the information that I'll be talking about. So we're going to get started, and I'll just explain what we're going to cover today. I'm going to briefly talk about understanding the graduate job market, because we talk about it like it's a single thing, a single sort of one single thing, but it's much more complex than that. So we're going to dissect it a little bit and find out more about what do graduates actually do. We're going to talk about finding a job search strategy that works for you, because there's no one-size-fits-all approach to this. And we'll also touch a little bit on setting some goals and keeping yourself on track and keeping yourself motivated as well. Because particularly when we're spending more time at home, we're perhaps not seeing our friends and our sort of colleagues on our course so much, it can be quite hard to stay motivated. And so I'll be talking a little bit about that as well. So slides, not moving on. There we go. Right. So thinking about making choices after you finish university. The focus of Bootcamp is very much around employment, but of course we know that there's other options and other things that you're also thinking about doing. So employment might be one thing that's on your mind, and that could be graduate level employment, either in a graduate scheme or finding a graduate level job somewhere in something else. There's been a big increase in applicants to further study this year. Certainly I'm seeing lots of graduates who are now applying for master's programs in particular and are aware of the competition. So a master's can seem like a great idea when the economy feels less certain and there's and it's a sort of challenging kind of workplace. But do think really carefully about further study as an option. It's a really big investment of not only your time and your energy, but also money as well. And so it needs to be a good investment for you. It needs to pay off, and it needs to take you to where you want to go. If you're thinking about further study and you're at all unsure about whether that's the right thing for you, I would highly recommend that you book an appointment with a careers consultant and talk it through. Think about what your other options might be. It might be a great route for you, it might not, but we can help you to weigh up those pros and cons and get a clearer view on what might be your best way forward. Volunteering and work experience is still an option. There's still a fair amount of online volunteering you can do, and also in-person volunteering that's there. So traditionally, some students have decided to finish university and gain some more work experience, perhaps sometimes short-term unpaid work experience, perhaps through a volunteering scheme, and build their experience to help to leverage a move into something that they really want to do. So that is still an option for some. Taking time out, I think this is the area that has really been impacted so much by COVID. Traditionally, we know that a sizable number of graduates would take a bit of time out after they graduate and go travelling. And of course, that is so off the cards at the moment, and not really an option. And I think many of the people who would have done that previously are now thinking about sort of further study or other options. which does mean that there's more competition in some of those other areas. I was having a look around, and there are still some teaching abroad programs that are still recruiting. So it is still a possibility in some limited areas, but there are far fewer positions for that sort of thing than there would have been. But remember as well that taking time out and traveling, the world isn't going anywhere, and and there's no reason why you shouldn't work for some time or do something else for a while, and then build in that travel time later on. And if you've been working, you may find that your traveling can be more extended or perhaps slightly more luxurious because you have a bit more money than it would have been coming straight out of university. Self-employment is something that a lot of graduates don't really consider, but actually can be a really good route, and we're increasingly seeing this, especially with graduates who have sort of creative skills or technical skills that they can market to either to customers directly or to other businesses. We're running a session on Friday from Callum Russell, who has a company called Unpreneur, and he specialises in training young entrepreneurs in setting up their own business and getting started. So that's going to be a really valuable session if you're considering self-employment. And finally, unemployment, which I've put in brackets because it's not really a desirable outcome, but it's in there because unemployment is a reality in society. Many of us, including myself, will spend some time unemployed. That's okay, but ultimately, unless you've got a stash of money in a suitcase under your bed, we all need to work and we all need to earn at some point. So unemployment is a reality for many people at the moment in this sort of pandemic time. But it's what you do with that time and how you use your time productively to be able to move on, to develop yourself, to gain knowledge and skills that can then help you to move on to the next stage of your career. And it's worth saying as well that graduates are far less likely to be unemployed than non-graduates. So already you do have an advantage. And as we were talking about yesterday, as a graduate, you have extremely valuable skills which are in demand, and it's about sort of positioning those, understanding what you have to offer, and then, as Graham was saying earlier in the personal branding session, being able to put yourself out there and present what it is that you have to offer. So that's where our choices stand at the moment. I just wanted to tackle the topic of the sort of COVID sort of situation and where the market is now. And I put the word challenging there, but I think it's just really uncertain. And if you read the news headlines, there's so much news out there about what's happening in employment, and there's companies are going back to the office, or they're not going back to the office, or they're recruiting, or they're laying people off. And then when in the UK, when you bring Brexit into the mix, you have a very uncertain, potentially quite volatile employment market. So I wanted to get some perspective on that for you today. It certainly is challenging, but there are definitely jobs for graduates out there, and you only need to look at Grad Futures and click on the opportunities, the vacancies section of Grad Futures, and you will see just how many recruiters are currently looking for people. There's lots of hiring going on, both in small, medium-sized businesses and also in the large companies. For those of you that attended the first session this morning, you will have heard about the Graduate Jobs Fair that's happening next week. This is the Scottish Graduate Fair. It's online. It's on the 2nd of June. And there are, at last count, 89 businesses that are coming along to that fair and want to talk to you. And here's the really important thing. They're all recruiting right now. This isn't about them advertising for next year. This is current vacancies that are available. So, although there can be some negative messaging around, there are there's active recruitment going on by employers who want to take people on to start in 2021. And part of this, I think, has been that it's been harder for employers to predict their recruitment requirements, their hiring requirements, because of the pandemic. They didn't know what their short-term forecasts were going to be. Usually they're planning 2-3 years in advance. So that's a really sort of positive. There are a lot of companies that are having to take those sort of short-term decisions, much more quickly. So somebody's asked how many companies should we aim to speak with at the fair. Well, I think our advice would be do some careful research in advance. There will be lots there that you're probably not interested in applying to. Perhaps it's not your area of interest, or perhaps geographically it's not right for you, or perhaps it's just an industry that doesn't interest you at all. So do your research first. In terms of having sort of aiming, I think that the important thing to do is to prioritize the ones that you really want to talk to, and then have some backups. So if you could perhaps prioritize 10 out of that group that you really want to speak to. But I would also suggest as well that you follow up any that you weren't able to speak to by connecting with them on LinkedIn. So it's fine to say to then contact them afterwards and say, I'm so disappointed, but I was looking at all your marketing material, and I've been following you, and I'm really interested in in finding out more. So yeah, prioritize, and then sort of have a look on the system and see how many you can register with in advance. But I think there's it's a really important message around what's going on with all the news around the pandemic, is that there is a lot of distraction around will the economy get better, will there be more hiring, what's the position going to be for graduates, and actually you can't control any of that. All you can control is the way that you conduct your job search. So a few points around that. Employers are saying that they're getting higher numbers of applications than they would have done in the last couple of years. But importantly for you, a lot of those are of really poor quality. Those of you that were at Graham Butler's session this morning would have heard him say that a really large number, I think he said something like 15% of applications are rejected because the candidate hasn't done their research. You also hear statistics about how many applications are rejected because of mistakes, or they haven't followed the instructions. So just by taking a little time and care, getting feedback from your careers consultants about your applications, you can book an appointment and talk to us, and we will give you advice on how your applications are looking and whether you're positioning yourself and targeting effectively. So the research and preparation bit are absolutely crucial. And take a very professional approach to your job search. It isn't easy. You may make multiple applications, and it is going to take quite a lot of your time. But by organising yourself, keeping records, and continually networking, connecting with recruiters, you will hear about opportunities, and it will make your job of looking for a job so much easier. So what does the graduate market look like? Excuse me, I'm just going to... So the graduate job market, broken it down sort of roughly, but we're talking about employment rather than the other options that I was mentioning around sort of time out and volunteering and so on. And there's lots of information about those options on our website. So do go and have a look, because there's fantastic information and lots of links for you. I think often when people think about the graduate job market, they think about graduate training schemes. And graduate schemes are the well-known companies, so including people like Enterprise, who are with us this morning, and people like EY, who are with us tomorrow morning. These are well-known schemes where you are recruited as a batch of graduates, and you will all go through a scheme which may involve some rotations, moving from department to department. And at the end of that, you are trained and positioned for future leadership in the organisation. That is one way in, and some estimates reckon that that's probably about 20% of all the graduate jobs, graduate level jobs that are advertised. So if you just focus on the graduate schemes, you're also missing out on all the other advertised positions where somebody wants to recruit a graduate and they want to take them straight into a particular function or a particular job role. There may also be a training attached to that, and at the end of that you may be able to move up in the organisation. It very much depends on the organisation that you're working for. But these advertised positions will be on things like Grad Futures, but they also might pop up on LinkedIn or Indeed or multiple other sort of places. I was having a look at the read.co.uk website yesterday, and there's actually a huge number of sort of graduate entry type positions being advertised on Read. Now, Read is a recruitment consultancy who pull in vacancies from lots of other recruitment consultancies. So that can be another way to find advertised positions. But interestingly, there's also a very large hidden job market. Now, how big is the hidden job market is really hard to say, because the nature of it is that it's hidden. But I think the analogy of the iceberg is quite useful, that there is an awful lot going on where people are recruited into roles, but the job has never actually been formally advertised. So this might be, if you think back to perhaps if you've ever had a part-time job, or if you've ever had a sort of casual summer job, often that will be because a friend is working there and they say, oh yeah, I can get you a job in in Tesco's, or I've got a job at the festival, they need more people. That job's not going to be advertised anywhere. You won't formally submit a letter and an application, but there's no less value as a job. It's still a job. That happens throughout all levels of the employment market. So it happens at graduate level as well. And it happens for various reasons. Sometimes it will be that if an employer advertises a job, they will get so many applications that they actually can't deal with them. Particularly true for sort of small businesses, perhaps creative industries, charities. If they put a job advert out for one graduate, they will get so many applications that it really will be sort of very challenging for them to sort through that. So they don't actually need to advertise, because people will just contact them speculatively. They'll connect with them on LinkedIn, or perhaps they'll email in a CV and a cover letter stating that they're interested. So it's this idea of sort of speculatively applying for different jobs in different sectors is something that often people feel nervous about. And it is true that you might send lots of speculative applications out and not get any responses, but you may get responses, and it all helps to build that connection within an industry that you're interested in, and to let people know that you're out there. One of the points that was made in this morning's earlier session was that a lot of recruiters, if they can't help you, but they don't have a position for you, but they think you look like a good candidate, they can pass you on to somebody who might be able to help you. So this is about building up your network, letting people know you're available for work, and it's a really useful technique when you're job seeking. And finally, the other part of the graduate job market, which again is seeing an increase, partly because of COVID, is the idea of freelance work and self-employment. And this is a real option for many people, and particularly if you have a creative business idea and you want to get that started. So that's the other section. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a great session on Friday which will tackle exactly that. So highly recommend going along and hearing from Callum Russell on that session. I think the other bit of mystery about the graduate job market is we're not quite knowing what happened to everybody. So where did everybody go once they left university? What actually happened? And for some people, it's really important to hear about graduate stories and to get some inspiration from what happens, to people who have done your course previously. I'm sorry, this isn't a particularly sort of clear slide, but if you go into LinkedIn, and hopefully you all have a LinkedIn account. If you don't, I would absolutely urge you to set up a LinkedIn account for your job search. You must do that. If you go into the search box here at the top on the left-hand side and type in Heriot Watt, you will find the Heriot Watt University account. And under there is highlighted there in green is the tag for alumni. Now, when you click on that tag, you get something like 100,000 alumni of Heriot Watt coming up. And I've done a sort of fairly random search here. So I've clicked on the United Arab Emirates. So how many of the alumni of Heriot Watt are now associated with the United Arab Emirates? It comes up with 10,000 alumni. That's a lot of people who are also networking on LinkedIn. Now, what's particularly useful about this is that you can break it down even further. So you can look at where they live, you can look at the name of the company where they're working, but you can also search by what they studied. So if you type in the name of your degree, so if you type in physics, for example, and then you put in your search terms for the year, you can find out physics graduates on LinkedIn who graduated between 1990 and 2015, for example, and it will give you all of those profiles. And this is so helpful because it will give you an idea of organisations that people work for that you might not have thought of before. It will give you an idea of what people's career paths are. You can have a nose around their profiles and find out, how did they get to where they are now? It's a really useful research tool. But more than that, what you can then do is you can connect with some of those people. So if somebody's doing something that you're really interested in, then just reach out to them on LinkedIn, send them a friendly message and tell them, I'm doing the course that you used to do, and I'm really interested to see that you're doing this now. What advice could you give me on, getting my first foot on the ladder? Now, there's very few people who would mind getting a message like that. It's really akin to somebody from your old school contacting you and saying, hey, you're graduating from Heriot Watt and I'm thinking about applying there. Can you give me some advice? And of course you would. Most people absolutely would. And most people like being asked for advice. So never be afraid to ask for advice. So that's my sort of top tip around using LinkedIn and starting to build that network, but also getting a better understanding of what the career pathways are and how you might be able to move on from your undergraduate or your postgraduate course and into the world of work. I talked a little bit about sort of, getting a job being a job in itself and the importance of doing some research. I'm just going to skip through this sort of fairly briefly. But the key message is the better you understand your chosen sector, the more opportunities you will uncover and the better your applications will be. So your chances of then securing an interview and then securing a job are so much better if you really understand the sector, the industry that you're moving into. So things like, what types of employers are they? All sort of large multinational employers, or are they small players as well, where there might be opportunities to apply speculatively, where they're perhaps less likely to advertise positions that might be a good way into the industry. Understanding some of the trends that are going on. So, for example, things like green energy, is expanding massively. That's quite a sort of obvious one. Some sectors have been more affected by COVID than others. So having a bit of insight can help you, again, to target your applications more effectively. Think about, how do they employ people? For example, in some creative sectors, there's quite a lot of use of contract staff. So you might need to set yourself up as self-employed and then apply for contracts with different businesses to then build your experience before you secure more of a permanent job. And if they are advertising, where are they advertising? What are the timescales? Be aware that recruitment for the 2022 intake with the large companies will start at the end of summer. So, obviously give yourself some time off. You've done your exams, you've finished your degree, but then have it in mind that you need to start doing research. If you want to apply for the big graduate schemes, you need to be ready. And they recruit as soon as people start applying. So they will be making offers well before Christmas. If you leave it till later on, there may be fewer opportunities. So get to grips with the job market and the sector and the types of companies that you're interested in. And I think I've already made this point that if you do just limit yourself to the top graduate schemes, the ones the sort of big companies that take on lots and lots of people, you will be limiting the opportunities. And there's equally fantastic jobs that are advertised as individual jobs and not necessarily through the graduate schemes. Put the BBC up here because every time the BBC advertises anything, they get thousands of applications. So it's definitely worth a go, and you might get through to that final stage. But have a plan B and make sure that you're also applying for things that may be a bit less competitive. I just wanted to show you this as well. This is sort of thinking more creatively about jobs that might be highly competitive. And I've given the example here of being a forecaster at the Meteorological Office headquarters down in Exeter. And this is an employer that among some students, it's an absolute target. This is what they wanted to be. They wanted to be a weather forecaster for a very long time, and that's where they want to end up. And if you look at some of the literature, it will seem that the route in is to do a summer placement with the Met Office, followed by a graduate scheme. And you could apply this to lots of other industries as well, and lots of other types of jobs. However, there will also be alternatives, other ways that you can build your experience and use as a stepping stone into that same position, or perhaps into something else that you'll discover along the way. So, a few suggestions. The Met Office have other smaller offices that do take people for summer placements or for temporary work. There's a professional body, the Royal Meteorological Society in this case, who have got articles on getting in and sort of recorded chats with different employers about how can you build a career in this area, and alternative places you can go and work. Doing an MSc can be an option, but there's also lots of other free courses that you can do. So you can build your knowledge in weather forecasting on other sort of online platforms. There might be alternative employers who do something slightly different, but actually would be a good foundation for then moving into forecasting sort of later on. And using, as I said already, sort of LinkedIn for contacts and getting your name known so that you can start to build your knowledge of the industry and your understanding, is also really, really useful. But also, a lot of employers will have a big social media presence going on. So do follow follow organisations on Instagram and Twitter, and they may announce things like competitions or sort of research funding that you can then apply for, which can all help your profile when it comes to then applying for other jobs. So you can take this exercise, carry out this exercise with any kind of employer. And it's a really valuable thing to do, to just be really creative about how you're going to make that move into a particular sector or a particular role. Just a few more ideas on how to sort of uncover opportunities. So where else are you looking? So there's the obvious job search sites, some of which I've mentioned. There's your sort of target and prospect sites, as well as our own Grad Futures site. There's also things like Indeed as well, which basically scoops up vacancies from everywhere and has a huge amount on there. And there's also LinkedIn, which has increasingly become one of the sort of, it's now probably the sort of major player around job vacancies. So you need to be covering your bases with all of the obvious places. But where's less obvious? So think about networking. A lot of people feel very uncomfortable with the idea of networking, but networking as a job seeker is simply about letting people know that you have this skill set that is available and that you're open to opportunities. So it's about being sort of quite honest with that. And lots of recruiters, but also professionals, recognise that there is a sort of active area where people are presenting their skills and looking for opportunities. So LinkedIn, we've talked about connecting with people on LinkedIn. Professional bodies, if you have done a course which has trained you in a particular professional area, you might have student membership of that professional body. Make the most of it. They might be having all sorts of updating meetings. They might have opportunities for you to volunteer on a committee. There's lots of ways that you can build your network through professional bodies. And you can ask us about that, and there's certainly lots of links on our website that can help you to tap into professional organisations that you're interested in. Networking groups as well. So we have seen a bit of a proliferation of groups where people are interested in particular areas. It might be something creative. It might be a group that's perhaps for women in business. Have a look and see who's out there, because you never know who you might meet. But also it gives you that support as well and encouragement that you might need. I've mentioned about speculative applications and getting your application out there. There may not be an opportunity, but talking to recruiters, often they say that if a well thought through email lands in my inbox with a well presented CV, absolutely, I will take the time to reply to them. And if they don't suit my department, maybe I'll just pass them on to somebody else who might be able to use them. It can be a really great way of finding a position. Also think about identifying thriving areas. So at the moment, some of the obvious ones is the food sector, but particular sort of growth in kind of niche and boutique kind of sort of artisan type food, while we're all spending more time at home. People, some sectors have more money to spend on some of these luxuries. So maybe people like sort of alcohol suppliers, for example, who are doing direct deliveries, or sort of food boxes and things like that. Maybe opportunities there. The healthcare system, but not just for qualified healthcare workers. Anybody who wants to work in health communication or education. Also things like IT has been absolutely sort of staying steady and growing in a lot of sectors, and other areas like housing and welfare. These may not be ultimately your goal in terms of your future career, but think about whether these opportunities will give you a chance to develop skills, and skills that will then help you to pivot round into the area that you really want to work in. So it can be a really good sort of in-between opportunity. Recruitment agencies I mentioned with Reed, but there are plenty of others that are very easy to find online. And often when you look at something like LinkedIn and the job vacancies and Indeed as well, a lot of the vacancies there are being put up by recruitment agencies, and they typically supply sort of temporary work, but not always. They do have permanent jobs on offer as well, and they do have graduate jobs on offer. Talk to your careers and graduate futures team, so talk to your careers consultants. And at Heriot-Watt, we're so fortunate to have consultants that are linked into particular schools. And what that means is that they all have really great sort of niche understanding and knowledge of who the employers are in that area. And they can really help you with, I was talking about the industry research earlier, they can really help you to sort of understand and gain insight into particular industries and what might be the best ways in. So they can give you really personalised advice on how to sort of really make your job search count in the areas that you're interested in. I've talked also about using social media, and do sign up to our social media as well, because there's loads of messages going out from us about events and people recruiting and so on. And then I said I would mention the Graduate Jobs Fair as well, and that is happening next week. And hopefully now you'll feel really equipped to go along and ask some really insightful questions and connect with employers there. Just on that sort of industry sort of insight, so the website is up on the chat there, but this shows you sort of information that you get there. So I've given the example of engineering and manufacturing, and it's broken it down into some really good sort of websites that can help you, not just with job vacancies, but with a lot of your industry research as well. Thanks, Keith, for putting up the details of the recruitment agencies as well, which breaks down the different sectors that different recruitment agencies recruit into, so you can target the ones that are really relevant to you. So I'm conscious that I'm throwing lots of information at you today, and I hope that's helpful. I'm just going to take a little step back and think more about how you actually conduct that job search, because it can be really easy to dive straight in and then find that you're either going in slightly the wrong direction, or perhaps not quite being as effective as you could be. So setting goals is really important when you're embarking on a project like a graduate job search. So, but first of all, think about where you are. You need to start from where you are. Any of these areas are fine. Don't feel bad if you're really at the beginning of starting to think about your job search. If you've not given it much thought and you don't know where to start, there is loads of advice out there. But your goal might not be immediately to make 50 applications in the next 3 months. Your goal might be much more about assessing your skill set and thinking about which industries might be suitable for you. So similarly, if you have some ideas and nothing is really kind of fixed and you haven't really kind of decided, maybe you want to take some time out and perhaps do some temporary work, perhaps try some things, maybe gain some work experience. So your goals will differ according to what stage you're at. If you're not sure which of these really applies to you, it's again really worth having a chat with a careers consultant, because we can help you to unravel some of that, and it's fine wherever you are, but what we can do is to help you to get some steps on moving forward, and so you feel like you're making, and you can see that you're making some progress. Set yourself some goals, because this will help you to keep on track. But not just sort of immediate goals. Think in terms of short-term, medium-term, and longer-term. When I'm talking to a student or graduate, I'll often say, if you're feeling quite unsure, I'll often say, well, what about the sort of 5-year? What do you visualise life being like in 5 years or 10 years even? What's important to you? And sometimes asking yourself those questions can bring out the things that really key to you, in terms of sort of lifestyle and job satisfaction, maybe financial. And so, thinking sometimes in the longer term can be helpful, and you can start to work backwards as to how you can keep yourself on track. That doesn't mean that you're fixed into that. You can change your goals. You can, it's a wonderful thing. They're your goals. You can do what you want with them, but by giving yourself, some direction, that can really help you to move forward. And so I've given some examples here. So perhaps short term, securing a job as an IT trainer in 3 months. But actually, although as a general goal, that's okay, you probably need to break this down even more into sort of more manageable chunks. So does that mean that you need to investigate employers who would potentially sort of take on somebody as an IT trainer? Does it mean that you need to adjust your CV because at the moment it's focused on something else? So by considering these sort of short, medium and long-term goals, and I've given some examples there, that can help to give you more of a sense of purpose, keep you organised and keep you on track. You also need to ask yourself some other questions as well, and sometimes these things are difficult. I think when we leave university and when we're going through university, we kind of imagine we'll graduate and then that's us. We're on this career pathway that will take us happily into the future. The reality often isn't quite like that. In reality, careers tend to be a little bit more messy than that. Perhaps you'll take a wrong turning. That's okay. You can reorient yourself into something else. Perhaps you will find something else that you're really excited about and want to move jobs before you would have expected. Again, these things are all fine. And as I said earlier, there may even be periods of unemployment where you'll need to really think quite hard and deep about, how do I now reorient myself into a position? So there's just some ideas there about things to think about when you're doing this sort of action planning and thinking ahead. So in summary, just to sort of finish up in a moment, so think about how can I be more responsive and seize opportunities? And perhaps sort of make some notes about this, kind of assess what you're doing at the moment. How could you do things slightly differently? How could you be more proactive? Are there things that you aren't doing at the moment that actually will give you the edge over other candidates? And that might be about making some networking connections, or perhaps reviewing your CV and really targeting it towards a particular job. How can I build my self-confidence to tackle a daunting job market? And this is a really tricky one, because I think it's very natural to sort of feel that there's a separation between you and the job market in front of you, and that you're not quite ready, or you're not quite you're not quite the person that they need. But be reassured, employers do want you. They really value the degree that you have. And if you are feeling a lack of confidence, if you are feeling nerves, first of all, I would recommend that you watch Kirsty Hulse's session on the VLE on resilience and mindset. It's a great perspective on how to think about your future. But also do talk to a careers consultant. We're experts in helping people to sort of recognise their strengths and to move forward with those. Think as well about how you're going to carry on learning and training. Your education doesn't stop when you leave university. Your education will continue throughout your working life. And employers will look for that. They'll look for an interest in sort of professional development and self-development on an ongoing basis. And also think, how am I going to measure my success in the long term? So that's all about the goal setting. Do I have some particular goals in mind? Otherwise, you can feel a little bit directionless. But if you know where you're heading, that can be a really helpful, motivating tool. Finally, just remember that you don't need to do it alone. We've all spent quite a lot of time in isolation, facing our screens over the last year or so. But it really doesn't have to mean that your graduate job search is also a solitary occupation. We all need cheerleaders in some way, and this might be family, friends. It could be people from your course. It might be people that you've studied with, and perhaps you can join together and you can support each other in this process. And you might be applying for the same jobs, but that's okay. You could still encourage each other and support each other. And your mentor. So sometimes it can be worth finding somebody who's a bit more experienced than you and asking them for advice. So perhaps somebody who graduated from your course a few years earlier. They don't have to be a formal mentor, but somebody who is just willing to help you, perhaps give you some feedback on your applications or give you a boost before you go into an interview. Can be a really useful person to have in your sort of armoury. Your network more generally, so thinking about who are you connecting with on LinkedIn, but also who are you connecting with more personally as well? Are there people who other people know who would be helpful to you? And also your careers consultant, who I think I've already sort of mentioned, that they're a group of really sort of understanding and invested people. They really want you. We all really want you to do well, and we will give you as much help as we possibly can. So consider who's in your support team. So just to finish off, so just a few summary points in terms of getting ahead in the graduate job market. It comes back to doing your research. Understand what it is that you're applying for, understand where you're going, and then try and be flexible, try and sort of widen your search. Think up some goals that can help you to move forward on that search. But flexibility really is one of the key things that will help you in a market such as it is, when it's unpredictable. You may not have the opportunity to have your first choice, but what's your plan B? What's your plan C? Think about those goals. Think about articulating those, perhaps keep a notebook, write things down, get really organised, and that will help you to focus on moving forward. Sharpen up your job application technique, a really practical thing. And tomorrow, along with Lorraine Chambers, will be offering a session on job applications and interviews, which will be packed full of really practical tips on how to present yourself really effectively in the application process. And I think also, do remember how far you've come. Give yourself a huge pat on the back for graduating in the middle of a pandemic, when there's been challenges that none of us could have really predicted. And you've come this far. Yesterday at the sort of introductory session, Kirsty Hulse talked about sort of reflecting back to, as a new student, your first day at university, how did you feel then? And for most people, they would have been feeling just as daunted as they are at this stage when you leave university and you're moving on to the next stage. So remember how far you've come, have a positive mindset, appreciate that you have a lot to offer, because you really do. So finally, just some things to highlight that will be really helpful to you over the next few months. Our web pages, the Want to Find a Job section is absolutely packed with information and links. If you haven't looked at it, you absolutely must, because that will really get you started in doing your research and understanding the graduate job market. The jobs fair online next week, and that's on the 2nd of June. And again, really recommend that you attend that and do your research beforehand. I think this morning it was suggested you spend about an hour. I would probably spend a little bit more than an hour just researching some of the organisations, prioritising the ones that you really want to speak to. And remember as well that we have more events happening over the next few days, and beyond that as well. It doesn't stop with the end of boot camp. The careers consultants are here. As a team, we're open through the summer. We'll be running more workshops, and you can make use of Careers and Graduate Futures personal appointments for up to 2 years after you graduate. So, you know, I'm certainly seeing graduates who have, you know, a year out of university, they've done all sorts of interesting things, and now they're looking at another career move. So we're here to support you on an ongoing basis. So that is, I know, a lot of information to share this morning, and I hope you've taken lots of notes and have lots of action points for yourself. We've got a few minutes, so I'm very happy to take any questions. So if you have any questions, please just pop them into the chat box. Okay. Well, if there's no questions from today, we hope we'll see you for tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock in the morning. There is a fantastic employer panel. We've invited in CGG, who do technical recruitment, Ernst & Young, and also Hymans Robertson, who are actuarial and risk management. And they'll be coming in to talk about you know, what it's like from the recruiter's side. So what do they look for in candidates, and yeah, and you know, sort of how do they recruit, and also how it's been affected by COVID. So if you really want to get the inside story on you know, what's happening in the COVID sort of situation, online recruiting and so on, I would definitely sign up for that session. I think we've got lots and lots of people attending, so please bring your questions and we'll have a really good discussion going tomorrow. But thanks very much for coming today, and yeah, and we will see you tomorrow. Thanks for your question, Manta, asking about sort of assessing your skills to build and update your CV. In terms of the steps that I'd suggest that you would take, you might have been at the session yesterday where Lindsay Wilson was explaining about sort of assessing your skills and identifying where your strengths are. I think it very much depends on what it is that you're applying for, and doing your research and understanding what the employer is looking for. When an employer has a job in mind, they also have a sort of mental or even a physical list of skills that they are wanting to recruit when they recruit a candidate. So if you can think back to your experience and think about the most relevant things that you have done that evidence those particular skills, that's a really good first step. Your CV needs to reflect back the job description that you're applying for. I would also really recommend that you attend our session tomorrow on job search technique, on applications and interviews, because we will be talking about exactly that subject tomorrow. So I know that doesn't fully answer your question, but hopefully that gives you some ideas. Okay, so any further questions that we can ask, that we can answer today? Well, thanks very much, everybody, for your involvement today. Thanks for coming along. Hope that was useful, and we will see you back here tomorrow.